Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one we're going to be creating a damage resistance system so that each enemy you make you can decide to take, I don't know, 20% reduced fire damage or 30% increased ice damage, water damage, whatever. And you can do this for obviously any element, anything you want, just a way to simply add damage reduction or increase depending on what they are. And the benefit to doing it this way than many, well, not many other ways, but the reason this way is good is because other ways of doing it would involve like having loads of ifs or like a big switch statement saying, you know, if damage type this, do this. If damage type this, do this. Return that, you know, it'd be a mess. The way I've done it is really compact and simple, and you can build upon it. And I'll show you in action in a second after I thank the Patreon. So thanks Paul Robinson, Phil Baller, and Shaggy Rogers. If anyone else wants to help support on Patreon, the link's in the description. Apart from that, let's get into it. So I've built the actual scene and showing you it first so that you know what I'm talking about. So here's the player, an enemy, whatever. We're going to press spacebar and it fires a projectile. And here's the projectile. So you see, to open the prefab one, it has 20 damage of type fire. So I'm going to press spacebar. Okay. Now, if you see the enemy, it was on 100 health and now it's on 80. And I'll do it again. So it's taken, you know, 100 down to 80, down to 60, 20 damage. Okay. So it's taken 20 damage, the exact amount the projectile's meant to deal. And let's look. So we said the projectile deals fire damage, okay? So I can say, okay, on the scriptable object that I'm going to show you how to make, we've got the different types, fire, water, earth, air, and then the percent damage to take. So it's 100% at the start. So we could say, this enemy takes, well, if I did it by 50, obviously it would take half the fire damage. So it's going to be 50%. So if it's meant to deal 20 fire damage, but this guy takes half fire damage, you expect it to take 10 damage from the projectile. So if we go onto the enemy and fire it now, it actually goes from 60 to 50, which is 10 damage. And obviously, on the projectile, you could say, nah, this projectile is actually, you know, light. So if it's going to deal 20 light damage, well, this guy doesn't have any light resistance. So he's on 30, so now I'll go down to 10. And so on. And then, obviously, you could increase the values on here. So you say, you know, you take double fire damage, you change it to 200%. So that's really, and obviously you can always add to that, you can add a 9th one, and so on. Obviously you'd have to actually make the element exist, but it's simple to do that, and I'll show you how to do that, so let's get into it. I am just going to delete everything I've made here. All these scripts, goodbye. I'll keep the objects, obviously I just have 2 cubes, that's literally all I have is just 2 cubes, a player, an enemy, and that's it really, that's all you need. So I'm going to just remove these components, these blank ones. We're going to remake them. So we're going to need a few scripts for this, but obviously if you're implementing it into a system you already have, you'll have these anyway. So we need an enemy script to hit, and so I don't know, we'll just call it like enemy health. Okay, so we'll create a new script, enemy health. Let me actually just do it in this folder to keep it all neat and organized. So there we go, enemy health. Go drop that. We're in the scene view yet, so we can go drop that on the enemy. We're going to need something to shoot, so we'll just call it player cube. And so that's obviously the thing that's going to fire, the thing that's going to get hit, and then we need a script for the scriptable object for the damage resistances, so we'll just call it damage resistances, so on. And we'll actually need a script for the enum, unless you did it inside the script, but because you're going to have elements all over your game, if you do have elements or different types of damage, it's good to have it as its own script so it's easier to deal with. So we'll just call it damage types. So we've got 4 now, and then the final one is just the projectile we're going to use. So C# script projectile. I should probably call it like projectile. It's fine. I think I only have one called projectile in this project. I'm going to create a new project for the next video. I think got too many things in this one scene, in this one project, sorry. So the enemy, we've got enemy health, the player cube, and that's going to be a scriptable object. That's going to be an enum, and then damage resist. Oh, sorry, no, enemy health is not, but the damage resistance is going to be a scriptable object. So what we can do is we'll go to damage types first. So in the script for damage types, just delete it and put public enum damage types. Make sure to call it the same name that you've given your file. And this is where we can make a list in an enum of all the different damage types that we're going to have. And you can always add to this. You got to keep in mind, I'll mention in a second. So let's say, for example, you have fire damage. You have water, earth, air, arcane. This is just going off my game. Light. Oops. Dark. And then you might have, you know, some other ones like physical. Yeah, can't type. So you can format this how you want. You could have it all in one line, but I like having it spread out like this. Now you'll notice each thing in here, each element has its own value. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like a normal list. The problem is if you identify something as earth with a value of 2, and then we add something else in here, it's going to get that because that's now 2. Because obviously how it stores an enum in data is just a number for the type. So that's just stored as a 1, 2, 3, 4. So just make sure if you ever add new ones, add them on at the end. And if you change something in the middle, just make sure through all your things that rely on it, make sure it's all fine. You can actually set a value. So like this is 2, so you could just say equals 4. And that's now 4. So there you go, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, you want to leave it though, by default, just 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So these are damage types. Get rid of that, we don't need that anymore. Alright, obviously if you need new damage types, and just add to that. Then what we need is, now we need to go to damage resistances. Now this is a scriptable object, and this is going to sit on our enemy to calculate and sort of handle the, you know, how good it is against fire or water or whatever. So this is going to be a scriptable object, so it derives from scriptable object. We need to be able to make one, so create asset menu, file name, we'll call it damage resistances, and menu name, I'll just put it in as damage resistances as well. Okay, and then now in here we need to create a struct to store, because the easiest way to do this would actually be using a library, but the problem is you can't serialize libraries, you can't make them editable in the inspector or anything. So libraries are good for doing stuff behind the scenes as such, but you can't really do the front end part of it, at least not in Unity. So the way I would do it in this would be to make a public struct called like resistance, so that we can then store in this a public damage type. So we can have a damage type from that list, and alongside it we'll have a like percentage amount damage to take. So public int percentage to take. Alright, so we'll store these two values, and then now we need to have a list of these. So public list of type resistance, and we'll call it resistances, is a new list of type resistances. And also for this to be editable in the inspector, we have to add the tag before it for system dot serializable. And then if we didn't have this line, it would still work, except from this wouldn't be editable in the inspector, which is what we need. So obviously we can store a list of these now. And all we need in here is a simple function to return. So we need a public. It returns a integer, the amount of damage to deal. So we're going to pass in the damage, and it's going to return a damage again. But the return damage is after calculating resistances. So we'll say it's a public int, so it returns an integer called calculate damage. I say like from with resistance. I don't know, it's a long function name, but whatever. So we're taking an int damage and a damage type, like so. And what do we do in here? Well, what we need to do is, usually with a dictionary, you'd be able to go to a particular key and get its value, but you can't really do that here. We simply have to loop through this list until we find one where the damage type's the same. So it's basically like looking up in the list. So we'll say 4, and then you can double tab to get it filled in for you. So while I is less than resistances.count. So it's going to loop through this list, and we'll say if resistances I, so the one we're currently checking, if the damage type of that is the same as the damage type we've passed in here. So if the damage type we're checking is the same as this one in the list, then we want to find the damage that's associated with that one. So we can say return, and we want to return So think about the maths for this. So we're going to take in a damage, we want to return a damage. So we'll take our damage. Wait, I need 2 open brackets. So we'll need damage times by, and then we need resistances I dot damage, percentage to take. So that's, if that's 100, we'll times the damage by 100, because it's 100%. So then just to make that the actual value, rather than actually timesing it by 100, we need to take this calculated value, I keep pressing the wrong button, and then divide that by 100. And we can return that. And that's it, basically. It goes red because we don't have a full return. Like, for example, if this for loop didn't happen or it didn't get into here, we'll never return a value. So in the end, we can just return 0. So that if we try and damage something in the game and it deals 0 damage, we can trace it back to here and know that something's gone wrong with the resistances. But that's all we need for our scriptable object, okay? We need to call that, but we'll call that in the damage, in the health script. So now let's go across to the enemy health. So the enemy health is going to store an integer for health and an integer for max health, and it'll store we need to store a damage resistance object. So damage resistance. So that's the damage resistance of this object, and then we can have a function. So public void deal damage. So when we access it, we can do .deal damage, and we want to deal an integer damage and a damage type. And what we want to say is we want to say health minus equals. Now normally you might just do damage. You might just take away the damage, but we want to calculate something. So we want to take away the return value of this. So what we can say is we can say damage resistance. So it's the damage resistance object on here. Dot calculate damage of resistance, and it takes in an integer damage and a damage type because that's the function I made. So we can say damage, comma, damage type. Damage type. Oh, what was that? My OBS thing just went off. I don't know if you guys heard that. It's no, I have no. Okay, sorry. And then we just do a check. You know, if health is less than or equal to 0, then of course destroy the game object. So whenever we subtract the damage we're going to take, we want to calculate, you know, whether we should take that amount of damage, because it depends completely on our resistances. So now that that's done, there's not much more now actually. So what we can do is we can actually create the damage resistances here. So we created it in asset menu. So create all the way up to the top damage resistances, and we'll just call this for like test enemy resistance, and we can go drop that on the enemy in its field for this. And the health can be the max health can be like, we'll put 200, and inside here I'll just add a quick private void start health is equal to max health, so that whenever we start it's on the right health. Now in the enemy resistance thing, as you'll see, we'll have a list, and we made 8 elements, so I'll just put 8 and open them all up, and then this is where you can edit for each thing how much to take. So we can say by default we want fire be 100. Let me just put 100 in all these, just by default. You can't actually set it to be 100 by default in a struct because it's not got initializers. You could use a class instead of a struct, but then it creates garbage collection. Structs are more efficient if you can use them, and this is perfect for a struct. You just have to get used to, you know, pasting in 100, or well, you're going to put it to whatever value you want. So we'll say, you know, fire here, water, earth, air, arcane, light, dark, physical. So by default, this enemy takes the normal damage from each thing, and then we can tweak that when we test it. So the player cube is going to simply just store a game object to shoot. So private game object projectile, and we'll write a simple function. So in the update we want to say if input dot get key down, key code dot, we'll use spacebar. So if we press the spacebar, then we want to instantiate the projectile at our transform dot position, and then we want to do a bit forward. So plus transform.forward. So that just adds 1 in the forward direction. And then our rotation. Whoops. The rotation bit doesn't really matter. And then that's fine actually, because then we can set the velocity inside the projectile, I guess. So if we go back here, just give it a second. We need to create a projectile, so quickly make a sphere. Let's reset that, put it to 1. We'll scale it down to be 0.5 in all the axes, and we'll give it material. I'm sure I made one earlier or something. There we go. I'm just get it blue. So this projectile, we need to make it prefab, so drag it into your inspector, and we want it to have the projectile script that I made and a rigid body. But we don't want it to use gravity. We want it to just kind of go in the direction. We don't want gravity to affect it. Okay, we can go out of prefab mode. So here it is, and go into the projectile script. We want to have a serialized field private float force, serialized field private int damage, and a private damage type, like so. And then in the start, we can say get component rigid body dot add force in the forward direction, so transform.forward multiplied by force, and force mode dot impulse. And then inside here, we also need to check when we hit something. So we can say private void on collision enter. If collision.collider, so the thing we collide with, if that's dot get component enemy health. So if the thing we hit, if it has the component enemy health, and the way to check if it has the component is does not equal null. So if it does have the thing, then we can say collision.collider.get component enemy health dot damage deal damage. Want to deal our own damage and our own damage type, and then we can say at the end here destroy the game object, so the projectile goes away when we hit the enemy. Okay, now we'll go back and we'll just fill in some numbers and see if it all works. So our sphere has a force of 10, I don't know, damage of 20, type of fire by default, for example. And then we can, well, it's blue, so let's make it water. All right, so it's water. We can delete it now because it's the prefab. So this fires this prefab, so the player cube, and then the enemy has its health being set when we start. So if we press play now, the health will be set to 200, and the player shoots this when I press spacebar, and it deals 20 damage. 20 damage. Now if I go to the resistance, and I say, you know, you take 200 or 300%. So instead of dealing, is it 20 damage I said, in our deals, oh wait, did I, this is what I did wrong. Okay, make that a float, and we can multiply that and then cast it as an integer, because what's happening is it's not doing the calculation correctly, at least as far as I can tell. So if we say 300% and it's dealing 20 damage, we expect it to do 60. So press play. So this should deal 60. It's dealing 20. Did I not actually add that into the code? The return value of this, returning the damage times by the percentage to take on the object. Projectile. deal damage. Take away the return of that. So that's not returning the right thing. So damage times resistance to take. I had this working earlier. So resistance is I.damage type. So if it's the same damage type, yeah, that should be fine. Let me just log debug.log damage times resistances I.percentage to take. So this should be, oh, let it stop. So the damage is 20 times by, wait, what? How much damage did I set on here? Did I set the number wrong? So fire 300 times. Times 20 by 300. That's not giving the right value. That's actually interesting. Why might that be then? So, well, it's less than resistance.count. Resistances I.damage type is the same as that damage type. It's not getting that right. It's saying that is wrong. So, oh no, I'm an idiot. I'm just an idiot. It's because it's blue. I changed it to water. So 300. There we go. Yeah. Some of you are probably just saying that was the reason. Cube, enemy, bang. Deals the right damage. Okay, I did code it right. Everything's fine. It's fine. I'm just an idiot and I forgot that was the wrong kind of damage. But that proves it works. So if I tweak the the fire type and it's water, then obviously it's not going to make a difference. But yeah, anyway, so it all works. There you can see, and it dies. Okay, so yeah, that video dragged on a bit. I mean, obviously I wasted like 2 minutes at the end just fumbling around. But yeah, some of you probably find that funny. But anyway, yeah, so if you like the video, then obviously feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Join the Discord server if you haven't already. Leave video ideas in the description below. Not in the description, that's what I do. In the comments below. Apart from that, thanks for watching and goodbye.